Now, our first announcement, special announcement, is that this year the AAVSO is honored to be able to celebrate its 110th anniversary. That's 110 years of continuous citizen science and continuous stellar data. And we want to give a huge thank you to everyone who has contributed to that accomplishment. We are also very excited to be able to celebrate our 110th anniversary in person, finally. That will be in Somerville, Massachusetts on November 3rd through 7th. We're going to start out with a spectroscopy workshop, which should be quite fun. And then we'll have our annual meeting all about variable stars. The annual meeting is going to have some of its presentations live streamed online so that those of you who aren't able to make it in person can still enjoy the show. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, please take a picture of that URL right there on the screen, aavso.org/110-annual-meeting, and go visit that page to find more about the spectroscopy workshop, the annual meeting, the abstract submission process, because we have extended our deadline. You have until September 30th, and the registration links. You can find all of that on that page. All right, next up, let's cover a little Zoom tutorial. So down at the bottom of your screen, you will find two very useful buttons, one of which is the chat box, which I know that you guys have just been using to introduce yourselves. And the other one is the Q&A. Now, whenever you have a question at any point during the webinar, so it doesn't matter if it's during the presentation, it won't interrupt the speaker. You can just click on that Q&A box, type in your question, and hit submit. At the end of the presentation, we're going to have a special Q&A session, and we will try to answer as many questions as we can. And if you are watching this live on Facebook, please feel free to just post your questions as comments, and I will be monitoring those as well. Next up, if at some point during the webinar you encounter any difficulties with audio, unfortunately, we're not able to help from here, but you can probably fix your audio yourself. All you need to do is click on the up arrow icon, which is next to the mute button, and then use the settings menu that appears. Also, we have automatic closed captioning. It's not the most accurate, but it is better than nothing, and it can be quite entertaining. So if you would like to enable or disable the closed captioning, just click on the little CC button, which you can find down at the bottom of your screen. Finally, we would like to thank and acknowledge our sponsors, DC3 Dreams and Voice Astro. DC3 Dreams provides high-end observatory automation and web-based multi-user remote imaging. The AAVSO net observatories use DC3 Dreams ACP Expert for the Bright Star monitors and other programs. The AAVSO Photometric All Sky Survey project, also known as APAS, has used ACP Expert's AI scheduler to automatically acquire over 500,000 star fields, hands-off, at a rate of 1,000 square degrees per night. This has resulted in photometry for over 128 million objects in about 99% of the sky. The Boyce Research Initiative and Education Foundation provides online astronomy education, observatory resources, and research experiences to students, student teams, and schools in order to learn how to perform observations, conduct research, and publish their results in scientific journals, such as the Journal of the AAVSO. Please check out their webpage to learn more about their work. All right, now, there is a good chance that you will recognize today's speaker because he's been an active member for quite a while and given presentations for the AAVSO on many occasions. If you attended the Bright Star Monitor webinar several weeks ago, then you will remember that he is a part of the AAVSO net management team, which means that he helps to keep our extensive robotic telescope network on the sky and ready to do science. He is also a volunteer software consultant for the AAVSO, and it is in that capacity that he helped to create the AAVSO's Exoplanet database, which he also helps continue to maintain to this day. That makes him, without a doubt, the very best person there is to show us all the ins and outs of the AED today. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I give you George Silvis. George?
Greetings. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. And I'm looking forward to filling in all the mechanical details of taking your exoplanet observations and getting them into a database that the rest of the world can view. So let me start off. Let me get my screen share fired up here. Okie doke. I believe we have the main screen there. Yes, Lauren?
Yep, it looks great. Awesome.
Okay, so this is all about using the AAVSO's exoplanet database, or what I call the AED. You've had lectures and seminars on what exoplanets are, how to observe them, but this particular webinar is all about just what do you do with your data and what does your data look like. So let's get rolling here. And I also want to preface that this facility at the AAVSO, the database, was conceived by Dennis Conti many years ago. He thought it was time for the AAVSO to get into the game. There were some other organizations in Europe, but he thought we could do a good job, and he did the initial design. I stepped in as the implementer. I wrote the code to put it up on the website. So any imperfections in the website, they're mine. You can contact me about it. Okay, so what I want to do. Okay, so here's a quick outline of what I want to cover. Just a quick review of what exoplanets are all about. But most of you are here because you know what they are, so that'll be short. Review what exactly does a transit submission look like? What kind of data? I mean, it's different from a photometry submission, so we'll take a look at that. Then we'll take a look at the mechanics of how do you get your submission into the database. There's also the question, well, how do you prepare a submission? There's a number of mechanisms when we can touch base on them, not in a great deal of detail, but enough to give you some direction. And then I want to remind people that exoplanet host star photometry is also important. For the AAVSO is a variable star organization. We love photometry. Exoplanet transits are timing type observations, a little bit different, but so there are basically two types of observation here. Okay, what's all the excitement about? Well, at this point, some 4,500 exoplanets have been identified up in the sky, which is pretty amazing when 10, 15 years ago, people are going, I wonder if there's one. But at this point, TESS is up there cranking away, examining the sky, and it's doing the heavy lifting of identifying where the exoplanets might be. Because it's pretty hard it's like a shot in the dark for an amateur to stand and just stare at a part of the sky and hope that they'll come across one. So we have TESS up there doing the heavy lifting and giving an indication of where we can look to actually image and measure a transit and get an exact timing of it. Now there's many ways to learn about exoplanet observing. The AAVSO has choice courses and all sorts of web resources. In fact, let me show you one. We have a whole exoplanet section within the AAVSO, and this is managed by Dennis Conti. But here would be where you should start if you want to learn about exoplanets, what the AAVSO is doing there, and all the different kinds of resources that are available. So you can get to that by going to the AAVSO website. Okay, as I mentioned before, there's two kinds of exoplanet observations. One is photometry. This is where you do multicolor filters and measure the brightness of the host star. And actually, when you want to do photometry, it's probably best if the exoplanet is not in the way, just in general. But photometry data goes into what's called the AAVSO International Database, the AID. Transits are a different kind of observing. This is where you're trying to establish a timing by taking many observations in a row. 100, 200, some, or maybe even 300 images in a row, trying to measure the brightness and catch the transit of the planet in front of the star. So this is a timing observation, and not really appropriate to push that kind of data into the AID. That's why we created the AED, the AAVSO exoplanet database. Now, right now there's two kinds of observations going on for transit observing. One is the TFOP, the TESS follow-up program. So this is where, in order to be a TESS observer and to participate in the TFOP program, you have to be pretty good. You have to take a course. You have to pass a test. And what that does is give you access to the latest data from TESS and a chance to be the first one to confirm, and the first one to be to confirm a transit or the existence of a transit. That kind of data would be great to have it in the AED, but it probably cannot be submitted for about a year, since test data is proprietary for at least 1 year. But after that, anything that's been discovered is open game, and this is where general population, you and me, can go out, take a look at these exoplanets, do a measurement, and it's important to continue to observe these exoplanets, and that's a key thing. One observation gives you one data point, but how accurate is that transit? What is the ephemeris? When will the next one happen? That's only refined by doing it multiple times and having many observers take these measurements. And it's very important to really refine that ephemeri. And I'll be able to show that in a little while. One other thing to note, that data submitted to the AED goes to JPL and NASA. That is, the database was built in conjunction with the Exoplanet Watch program, and JPL scrapes the database nightly for any new updates. And we'll take a look at what they do with the data on their website. So it's kind of exciting to have not only submit data, but actually see it get used in the real world. In fact, here's a recent announcement from Exoplanet Watch, where the James Webb Space Telescope hasn't even launched yet. And I guess it's been postponed until December. But they've already put out a request. Will people please take a look at HD 80606b? They want to really refine that, because the James Webb does not want to waste time waiting for a transit. It wants to know exactly when it's going to be there, so it can swing its high power scope there and start peering at it. And what it's interested in is really trying to catch atmosphere, to look through the edge of the planet. So it's kind of, as we roll along in the future, there'll be more and more direct requests from NASA to help support the James Webb and make the time spent by the James Webb more valuable. Okay, let's take a walk through the AAVSO website, and what we'll do is we'll see some of the data and so forth. So let's just take a walk through, and I'm going to switch to a browser. So here's our happy website with the announcement for the meeting. And we start here, submit and access data. And let's go take a look at exoplanet transits. Okay, so the mechanics of the database. First off, you see a search page. Well, there's not much here. Basically, what you can put a filter criteria here and then do a search. If you put no criteria in the filters, well, a search will bring up everybody. So you can see that it'll be 100 observations per page. There's 6 pages, so we have less than 600, but we have over 500 observations already lined up and ready that have been submitted. And the kind of information shown here are details, what the D-trend parameters are, if there were any secondary observers, some transit information. You also get displayed at the top here, the star and the exoplanet name. These are all B's, notice, but some of these stars have multiple planets. So it'd be B, C, D, whatever. Here's the observation date. This was actually done in 2011. So if you have old transit data back in on your hard drive, you can dig it out and submit it. And then gives you an approximate scale of the 72 observations over 3.6 hours. And here's a reference number. Now we can collapse that. Here, let's drop down. I want to take a peek at. So here's one of Cotter 1. If we take, you can get a quick peek at the data, what it looks like. A fairly crude display, but you can take a peek at the data. And you're also welcome to take a much more detailed look. Get back here. You can download the data. Now the data is going to come down as a zip. And here we'll sit. And this is basically the data that has been submitted. So here's our chance to take a look at some detail here. Okay, I'm going to dive into that database. There we go. So this is what a submission is. It's going to be a text file, which is the submission file. Let's take a peek at that. Excuse me. Okay, so the transmission file, the submission file is going to be a text file, and we'll go over the details on how it's filled in. It's a very specific information that's needed. I mean, dates, the OBS code of the observer, the filters that were used, exposure times, priors, this will also include the raw data, which is like timestamp, magnitude, and error of the magnitude, detrend parameters, and so forth. And these are covered in the more detailed courses. This is just where the data is going to end up. One thing to note is that the data is going to be normalized. That is, if it's in flux, it's all going to be about 1, be nominally 1. The other things which are included in a submission, you can send various images. So let's take a peek at this one. So this is an output that was generated. It looks like it came from the exotic transit tool, and it shows how they fit the data, what they see in the data. So they show not only the transit is fit to that data, they also show how the residuals are resolved. Now note also that there's no FITS files in here. Don't go submitting FITS files. You want basically reduced data and enough images in it to give some a student or a scientist to take a look at, to get an idea of what kind of data, what you were looking at. So it's going to be a couple images, and that's free form. The other thing is there'll also be some information from site and equipment. That is, if you're going to submit data to the AED, you will have to be, well, the requirements are you're going to need an OBS code, not necessarily a member of the AAVSO, though that's always a wonderful thing. But even a non-member can come in and get a observer's code and be able to submit data. But before you submit data, you will need to have prepared a site and equipment. So we can take a peek at, well, tell you what, we're going to get to that. So here you can search and take a look at data. The documentation tab is going to describe, well, that the long form that you have to fill in. This will describe what has to go into that form. You're going to have a pound OBS code equals line in it, a pound to limb, everything, all these things. And this is checked very rigorously when you submit a file. You come along, and if you don't have something that is required, it won't accept it, and it'll tell you what is missing. Now, this looks all pretty daunting, but in fact, if you're using one of the products like Exotic or Astro Image J, AIJ, they will prepare your data in this format. They will fill in all these blanks for you. And in fact, of the 500 observations, I think 99% of them are from exotic, which comes from the JPL Exoplanet Watch program, and AIJ. Those are the two primary ones. So this is the key reference if you want to know what's going to be needed in that file. And then the submission process is fairly straightforward. Here it's going to want to know your site and your equipment package. That is, if you're not familiar with this, this is part of the AAVSO, part of your account, where you can go through and define various sites from which you observed, and then you're able to refer to it later on. And you can also define your equipment. I actually have Dennis's equipment in here too, part of my testing. So once you have these two prepared in advance, and you select the ones that apply to the observation you're submitting. Let's get back here. Then you submit your report form. Go out and select, and there's one file. And you need to, then you're allowed to submit a number of other files, these various image files that might come with your submission. There's a limit, 2 megabytes. This is just to prevent people from trying to submit their 110 FITS files. And because we're under GDPR, you're going to have to do this little check mark and to acknowledge that you understand the boundaries of GDPR and that your rights with the data. I mean, and part of the rights with the data is that you have the ability to, you can go to your observation, you can delete it if you want to remove it for any reason. The delete button only works on your data, unless you're me, and I can delete anybody's data, but I don't, honest, unless requested. Okay, so that's some of the gory details, and hopefully I'm not able to see the question and answer box, but hopefully people are raising their hands. And actually, it might be appropriate, Lauren, if there are any questions directly on the database and the mechanics, maybe we should take a look at those now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. It doesn't say unmuted on my screen. No, we don't have any of those questions yet.
Well, I see something from Pablo. Greetings, Pablo. If you have a bunch of old data, more than a year old, Kepler, absolutely, you can submit this data. You need to go through the process of being able to create that submission form. And you might want to, if your old data is in the form of 120 FITS files, you want to run those through Exotic or through AIJ. But old data is good data. And actually, the more old data that's out there, the better we'll be able to refine things. Because that's the key. The key part that I want to emphasize is that what happens to your data. So I'm still here, right? I want to let's go over to the Exoplanet Watch page and take a look at they have a section called results. I can back up one just to see it. So, and the results that they're showing are all data that's been collected off the AAV. So I showed you a Qatar observation. We can go take a look at how much data do we have on Qatar 1? So, and you can see here, this is an OC diagram. Along the bottom is 0 is today, and it goes back 2,500 days. So that's like 8 years. And what it is how refined is the transit timing? How accurately do we know when the next one's going to be? How accurate is that period? And this being 8 years old, I wonder if this is like one of the first observations of Qatar. And these are all submitted by students. I think the one we were looking at was about 100 days old, so it's maybe one of these. And it looks like, well, not everybody's right on, but this is where statistics and lots of data allow you to refine so that the error bar of this you can see the gray area is the error, the estimated error. It gets smaller and smaller the more data you pour into it. And then all the observations are then shown down below here. So if you know your ops code, you can tell your friends you are on the JPL website and your data is out there for display. Other thing interesting to note is that a transit observation doesn't have to be perfect. The scope might have shut down, or you might just catch the beginning or the end of a transit. Or you might have set up and really thought you had the right time and you get a total flat line, you get no observation. Well, if there's real doubt about the transit, you need to submit this. You can submit that too, because that becomes important information. This particularly applies to the one that the James Webb is asking for, the HD 80606b. If you look up that star, it's going to be a really difficult one to observe. The transit is estimated to be 12, 13 hours, so you're not going to get the whole thing. So you're looking to try to catch the ingress or egress. The other thing is that the period of the planet of this planet is like 100 days. So you might only get 1 or 2 chances a year to get this observation. I think it's coming up for the Northern Hemisphere in December. So if you go gunning for that and you get a flat data, submit it anyway, because that helps rule out. That's all grist for the mill. Okay, so back to, here's some other notes on a note on in terms of planning your observations. I mean, you can go to Exoplanet Watch, and it has a section for how to search, what are some interesting planets that are coming up or should be good transits for you or for different time zones in the world. A far more refined transit planner is the one at Swarthmore, where you can really plug in your information, exactly what is your location, how high is your horizon, and get an exact estimate of what's going to be happening tonight. So on those nights where suddenly it's a clear night, now that doesn't always happen, right? And you actually have time to observe for 3 or 4 hours. But your next question is, well, what exoplanet's up there? This is the kind of website that can really give you the detail to say, oh, this one's available. Check your watch. Starts in about 2 hours. Perfect. Because a transit observation, you really want about a half hour at least before the estimated transit time, and you want to carry on after for at least a half hour. So you really want both wings of the transit, of both sides of the dip. And for you photometrists out there, what I do is, as soon as I get on the star, I take photometry of the exoplanet host star. I do BVI observations, and what the heck, do a spectrum, get a grading spectrum of it. This is all data which can be saved and put into the AID. And this will be important because when the James Webb goes looking at these exoplanets, it's not just it wants to see the dip, but it also wants more information about what's this star like? Does it have any natural variations? And that's only going to be revealed by long-term light curves developed by the photometry data. Okay, doke. Let's take a look at questions and answers. We're getting close to the end, but I don't want to leave too much stuff behind here. Julio, Lauren, shall I read the questions out and tackle them? I think you're muted, Lauren.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, great. My My Zoom is glitching. The text is all overlapping each other and stuff. So normally I would read out the questions, but it might be a good idea for you to read them out this time. I apologize.
No worries. Okay. Yeah, Julio's a friend from the Exoplanet Watch. Um, there's a number of Slack channels out there where exoplanet observers can collect and exchange information. And there's one for the Exoplanet Watch where participants actually help refine the software, which is called Exotic, and did all the testing for it. And Julio was part of that group. So in case of data images are taken using remote telescopes like LCO, where the remote telescope might be located in any geographical place. Shall we add each single site from the network to our observing profile? Yes, if you're going to submit data from LCO, you'll want to create a site on your account with those coordinates so that you can refer to it properly. Because it's important for timing analysis to know exactly where the observations were taken from. Remember, we're going for precise timing on this. So not only should your computer be set up and resynchronized with some time source, but we also want to be able to make corrections for your position on the planet and your position of our planet around our sun. So the data is not just Julian date that's going to be submitted. We're actually asking for more precise data, BJD, TDB, and Dennis will tell you what that means. Okay, can we use VFOT for photometry of exoplanet images? Well, for doing the photometry, absolutely. You can also do maybe a preliminary analysis of it for a time series and take a quick look at the data to see if you actually caught a transit, if there's a dip. VFOT is not set up to really help you fill in that submission form, but it's certainly doable. And you can take the information there, but the other products, the Exotic and the AIJ, are really geared up to take a series of FITS images, turn the crank, and help create a submission form. But send your photometry to VFOT, and it'll help you prepare data for the AID. Hello, Elizabeth. Okay, I have students. Instead of having each one replicate some equipment info for our observatory, is there a way they can link or import? Alas, no. Each student, if they want to submit their own data with their OBS code at the top, then they have to sign into the website and do it. And they would need to provide to develop a site profile for that location. Hopefully that's not too onerous, but that's currently the way it's configured right now.
George, could I
please do.
Yeah, so Elizabeth, I know you've asked me this question before. I think a solution here, and George, just comment if you want, would be for you to set up as a primary observer yourself, or set up University of Maryland as a primary observer. And then the students can be what we call secondary observers. And so the primary observer, namely University of Maryland, would have the profile for the equipment. And then for each subsequent observation with different students, basically it could be the primary observers, University of Maryland, and different secondary observers being the students. So you just have one primary observer with your equipment profile, but each subsequent observation could be with a different student.
Yeah, so the students would be a little bit buried being secondary observers, but the filter on the search page of the AED, when you put in an OBS code, it does include searching through the secondary OBS. So a student will be able to put their OBS code in and get the observations they participated in, get them to pop up. But the primary observer would be the account, the OBS code, which did the submission. There are a couple of special cases related to this. Micro Observatory is one, and Unistellar, which is using using a smaller telescope and combining data. They have there are other arrangements, but for now, it's primarily observers are responsible for submitting their data and managing their site and equipment information. Okay, okay. A quick question from Jean Pascal. I use hopes. Oh, does the format fit the AD? Yes, that's interesting. And in fact, I have that slide up there. HOPS is one of the people who are training people to observe exoplanet transits. I have not seen HOPS data. I've seen one example, and it seems to be less complete than what's being asked for in the AED. But if I get some more examples and people interested in moving their HOPS data into the AED, I can help sort that out. Your basic guide would be to take a look at the documentation tab of the AED and see what other information you need, and then try submitting it. The website has a pretty stringent vetting of the data, and it'll basically tell you, well, no, you forgot this. You could use it as a testing, and when you finally get it submitted, hurrah, there it goes in. But people who are doing HOPS, you're welcome to email me, and I'll help you sort out the details of making the conversion, because the more data we can get in here, and this is an important point, you can submit your data to the Exoplanet Transit Database and to ExoClock. And you're welcome to also bring it to the AED. We're not seeing a major conflict here. AED is a very plain website. It doesn't have some of the analysis things which are available on the Exoplanet Transit Database, or you can do various comparisons and science on your own. The AED is more a portal to the JPL and NASA. So there's slightly different functions, and bring your data. We'll take it all. Is it possible to submit combined observation data from different observers? Well, one question would be, why not just submit them both? Dennis, do you want to comment on this?
Yes, there is a way of doing it. In fact, there's a facility on the NASA Exoplanet Archive website called ExoFast, which is sort of the standard routine that even the professionals use for combining multiple observations. So if you go to the Exoplanet Archive website and search through or whatever, look for ExoFast, it's a very nice utility for doing that. They can also, that utility is also used for combining not only transit data, but also things like radial velocity data and so on. So that's what I would suggest.
Comment from Elizabeth, kind of concerned about consistency of site and equipment info. Well, ask your students to copy it down carefully, I think. And at some point we could, if there's glaring differences, we can sort that out, but I don't see that as a major problem. The site and equipment doesn't have to be, your position doesn't have to be better than 1/10 of a degree, I would imagine, for time computations, but I may be wrong. Okay, can we get exoplanet transit CCD images from the AAVSO net? That's a good question. And a number of people have put in proposals that, please, may I take over a telescope for 4 or 5 hours in order to do a full transit observation. The AAVSO net group is a little torn because that takes over a whole scope. So we don't want to be totally committed to doing that kind of work, but at some frequency we will be willing to do it. So the best thing to do is write up a proposal. There's an AAVSO net page, has a proposal page form page, and tell us why you want to do it, why it's important, and maybe it can be worked into the schedule. So we have done it. It's not going to be our primary function at the AAVSO net, but we will do some. Okay, Matthias, you did your first observation to the AAD yesterday, okay, and you used DMAG. Am I right that I can or should also report the real magnitudes of the star to AID as well? No, if it's a transit observation, which is the data from a whole series of images, and where the important part of it was the timing, then that belongs in the AED. Now, if in general, when you're doing a transit observation, your goal is cadence, how fast can you take the shots, and how long do I have to expose in order to get a signal to noise ratio, which would up beyond 100, up to 200. So those are the things that you're pushing. So that often doesn't allow you to do good photometry, because often a lot of these transit observations are done with clear, without a filter. So we wouldn't, it's not necessary and not appropriate to put in the photometry of all your 100 observations into the AID. They belong in the AED. Now, if there's a couple observations at the end or the beginning and want to put a handful of them in, okay. And if they're done with the proper filter, that's appropriate, but not the whole time series into the AID. Can I observe exoplanets from the micro observatory? Indeed, you can. The MOBS that is definitely into exoplanet observing, and there are many observations done by MOBS. In fact, if you go to the search page and type in MOBS for an OBS code, they have a special one for their organization. You can see how many have been done. I think we're talking a lot, like 100. So it's definitely contact them and find out how their program works. Okie doke. Okay, I just want to remind some of the how to get exoplanet host star photometry and some of the AAVSO resources to help you with this. VSX will have all of the, not all, but the majority of the exoplanet host stars. That is, the exoplanet, these are variable stars, right? So we got permission to put them in VSX, and they're classified as EPs, exoplanets. So you can get detailed information from the VSX. We're also looking to put them, make them available in the AAVSO target tool. So this would be another tool, not really helping you locate a transit, but able to tell you what exoplanet hosts are up for that evening if you want to do some photometry on them. And because the stars are in VSX and VSX, the AAVSO also will provide charts and comp stars via the variable star plotter. That is, we've leaned on our sequence team, and our initial push into the VSX was over 3,000 stars. And the sequence team said, okay, oh boy, we can do this. And they generated comp stars for that whole group. So conclusion, hopefully, other sources go into the real science of exoplanets and maybe the mechanics of actually running exotic or AIJ. This talk was mostly about, goes in between. Where do you put the data and some of the mechanics of the database? And hopefully this has helped. So I don't know if any more questions. Dennis, do you have some observations or thoughts?
Well, there are a couple of questions. One is, can we use an Astrodon exoplanet filter? And I think the answer is certainly yes. And again, Pradip is asking, can we use VPHOT for photometry of exoplanet images? I think, George, you addressed that. The only thing I would add is that VPHOT, unlike AIJ or exotic, doesn't do a model fit of transit. So that would be again using one of the other two packages.
Right. VPHOT is just the photometry and no fitting, which is really what you want for the transit. You want that real estimate of where the center is.
And just to reinforce something George pointed out earlier, for AstroImage, for example, there's a macro that will automatically take one of your measurement tables that you've done, and you go through just a series of very short questions that this macro asks the user, and it pumps out the report that George indicated earlier that needs to be uploaded. So it's a very easy way of creating the AAVSO exoplanet database report.
Okie doke.
Okay, well, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much. I thought your presentation was great. Unfortunately, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to join in during the Q&A. I hope you can still hear me. My Zoom is very much bugged. I can't see anything anymore. Not even the Q&A box. So I'm gonna just go ahead and deliver the closing announcements and hope that I can figure out how to troubleshoot this after we end the webinar. So, but thank you again very much for handling both the presentation and the Q&A. I appreciate it. And I'm going to try one thing here. If I can see my screen. Yes, okay. I think I can screen share that. Oh, no, my screen share button's gone. All right, you're just gonna have to pretend that I'm screen sharing a slide which says, hey everyone, go check out the AAVSO social media, because we do have a Facebook account, Instagram, I think, and we have a YouTube channel, which will be the most relevant to all of you guys, because this webinar was recorded and we will be posting the recording to the YouTube channel, and it will be joining a library with a whole lot of other very informative webinars, just like this one. You can also find Dr. Conti's Exoplanet webinar there on the YouTube channel from earlier this year. That was a very valuable one. So if you like today's webinar, please go check it out. And while you're there, please consider subscribing to the AAVSO's YouTube channel, because not only will you get notifications whenever we post educational videos that way, but you will also be helping the AAVSO increase its educational reach, because YouTube will be more likely to suggest our videos to others who are astro curious. All right. Now I want to go ahead and give a huge thank you to you, George, for sharing your time and knowledge with us today, and also you, Dr. Conti. We really appreciate it. And I would also like to give another thanks to our sponsors, DC3 Dreams and Voice Astro. DC3 Dreams provides high-end observatory automation and web-based multi-user remote imaging. The AAVSO Net Observatories use DC3 Dreams ACP Expert for the Bright Star monitors and other programs. The AAVSO Photometric All Sky Survey project, also known as APAS, has used ACP Expert's AI scheduler to automatically acquire over 500,000 star fields, hands-off, at a rate of 1,000 square degrees per night. This has resulted in photometry for over 128 million objects in about 99% of the sky. The Boyce Research Initiative and Education Foundation provides online astronomy education, observatory resources, and research experiences to students, student teams, and schools in order to learn how to perform observations, conduct research, and publish their results in scientific journals, such as the Journal of the AAVSO. Okay, 2 last announcements. First of all, this webinar series is being supported by you, the viewer. So please, if you're not a member, join the AAVSO. AAVSO membership comes with a wide array of benefits, which includes access to our remote telescope network, which you've heard a little bit about tonight, as well as our mentorship program. And as always, we would be very grateful if you would consider making a donation to the AAVSO. Every single donation matters and goes towards making programs like this one come to life.